evening. I'd like to call to order today, Monday, September the 11th, 2023, public hearing for the City of Tampa's Architectural Review Commission. Welcome. I'm Susan Klaus-Smith. I am the chair of the commission. I'm also an architect. If you're here to present a project, you will have limited time to make your presentation, so we suggest being thorough but concise. When coming to the microphone, you will need to identify yourself and your relationship to the project. The commissioners will not ask any questions during your presentation, and your project should be presented in the following order: the site plan, elevations, architectural details, wall sections. Our staff will then present the staff report, and we will then ask for public comment. Following your presentation, the commissioners will be asking questions in the same order as the presentation. When coming up to the microphone, please state and spell your name clearly if you're here to speak for or against a project. Your time will be limited to 3 minutes, so take some time now to summarize your comments because 3 minutes goes by very quickly. Also, if you are relinquishing your time to someone else, please make sure that the form is filled out and presented when coming up because administratively we need to enter those into the record. And then following the public comment, the applicant will have 5 minutes for rebuttal. The public hearing will then be closed, and the only comments which will be allowed after the public hearing is closed will be in response to any questions from the commissioners. The commissioners will then discuss the case and will make their decision based on the city ordinance, chapter 27 of the city zoning code, the design guidelines, the Secretary of Interior standards, Historic Preservation Development Review or HPDRC comments, and the testimony given at the public hearing tonight. Please remember the ARC can only act on items that are within our specific jurisdictional responsibility. Owners and or agents are independently responsible to obtain any appropriate permits and or approvals. Now, if you haven't already done so, please silence your cell phones, and I'll ask my fellow commissioners to introduce themselves, starting on my left.
My name is John Prokop. I practice architecture.
I'm Brent Taylor. I'm a general contractor and I'm vice chair.
My name is Dan Myers. I'm also an architect.
And with us tonight, we have legal staff, Dana Crosby-Collier, Alexis Guzman, sorry, Dennis Fernandez, and I am so sorry I forgot your name already. Heather Bonds. And I believe we are ready to start. Pardon? Oh, that's right, Ron. And we also have Ron Vila. He's in the antechamber. He'll come in shortly. And we have a reading of the minutes from last month's hearings, both Monday, August 7th, and Wednesday, August 9th, 2023. Unless there are comments to be received into the record, do we have a motion to
I move to accept the meeting minutes from August 7th and August 9th, 2023 into the record.
Second.
all in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Mr. Fernandez.
Good evening, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architectural Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Welcome to this evening's public hearing to both the public, those in attendance, and to the Commissioners. I do want to begin with a few announcements. First of all, I do have the ARC staff approvals to enter into the record. Those have been provided to the clerk. And we will make a motion at the end of the hearing to accept all the documents submitted. Next, I did want to make you aware that the 2024 ARC public hearing calendar has been approved, and you have a copy of that. I believe that's either been sent digitally to you, or it will be. But if you want to go ahead and add those hearing dates into your calendars, that way you can let us know if there's any conflicts ahead of time. We would appreciate that, and I'll continue to remind you of that for the next couple months. We will be holding the second part of our September application cycle review. Our next hearing will be on Wednesday, day after tomorrow, September 13th. I did want to announce that there will be a room change for that hearing. It will not be held in council chambers. City Council is going to be using the room that evening for its business. So we've relocated down to the second floor, right below us, and we have a hearing room set up in that area. So just essentially the same business in a different room on the second floor of Old City Hall, 315 East Kennedy Boulevard. And with that, we can move on to the conflicts of interest and ex parte communication disclosure, and I'll ask our legal counsel to handle that.
Dana Crosby Collier from the City Attorney's Office. Commissioners, I need to ask if any commissioner has a conflict of interest with any item on the agenda this evening?
I do not.
Have none.
And thank you. Has any member engaged in an ex parte communication regarding any item on the agenda this evening?
I have not.
Thank you very much.
We do have some continuations on the agenda this evening. I'll go ahead and go through these. ARC 22-180 for the property of 506 East Mohawk Avenue has requested continuance to November 6, 2023. I'll go ahead and take these as I present them to you, and so we would require a motion for that particular request.
I move to continue ARC 22-180 at 506 East Mohawk Avenue to the Monday, November 6th, 2023 public hearing at 5:30.
A second.
I second.
All in favor, please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion
Thank you.
carries.
The next two involve a series of multiple addresses, so I would recommend making one motion referencing both case numbers, and then you only have to read the addresses one time. So that is ARC 23-180, TACPA 23-05, and ARC 23-389, REZ 23-82, both requesting to continue to the October 2nd, 2023 public hearing at 5:30 p.m.
A motion, please.
Move to continue ARC 23-180, TACPA 23-05, and case number AR3 23-
ARC.
ARC,
Yes.
yeah. ARC 23-389, REZ 23-82 at the following locations: 110 East Oak Avenue, 1813 North Franklin Street, 1708 North Florida Avenue, 1905 North Florida Avenue, 1909 North Florida Avenue, that these be continued to the Monday, October 2nd, 2023 public hearing at 5:30 p.m.
Can I have a second, please?
I'll second.
All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And the last, one last request is for ARC 23-341 for the property located at 1504 South Howard Avenue. They are requesting a continuance to the Wednesday, October 4th, 2023 public hearing at 5:30 p.m.
I move for ARC 23-341 at 1504 South Howard Avenue be continued to the Wednesday, October 4th, 2023 public hearing at 5:30 p.m.
I second.
All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes the continuations. Next, we are ready for the swearing. Anyone who is going to be presenting or providing testimony or participating in public comment, if we please stand and raise your right hand so Ms. Guzman can administer the swearing.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you be providing today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Just, excuse me 1 minute.
When do you want me to do it? All right, Dennis, I would just like to disclose to everyone in the room that I do have a relationship, and I've worked in the past with Beryl Engineering. I understand they're going to be engineer of record tonight on one of these cases, so I just wanted to let everyone know that as a general contractor, they are an engineer. We have had past projects, but I can assure you that there's been no communication or any other sorts of that sort with this particular project and or this particular property.
So you are confirming that you could be fair and objective in this application? before it's-
Absolutely.
Thank you. Moving forward, Obviously, we had a series of continuances, but we do have one case on the agenda. That is ARC 23-367, which is a request by Silver Tuna LLC located, for the property located at 1105 West DeLeon Street. It is a request to demolish a contributing structure in the Hyde Park Local Historic District. I did want to begin before Ron comes up and presents the photo essay by saying that this is a fairly involved process for demolitions. It does often require a little additional time to get through either presentations with the applicants and their professionals that may also need to enter evidence, and for the staff and the staff report, and for any experts that we've hired. So I did want to disclose we are going to be requesting additional time at the staff report level, and we welcome the applicants to do so if they so need so. And with that, I'll ask Ron to come up and present the photo essay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and public. Ron Vila, staff with Historic Preservation. Briefly going through the photo presentation. I'd like to start with the 1929 Sanborn map. On your monitor, you'll see the outline of the historic district. You see the density and the fabric of the area in 1929. The subject site is circled. It is highlighted with the green. It is at 1105 West DeLeon Street. Just moving to a closer shot of that, shows the footprint in 1929. It is indicated with a yellow tint to it, which means it is frame construction. It does have a wraparound front porch. The main body of the building, of the primary structure, was 1 story with a 2-story pop-up in the back. There is a open alley in the rear, which measures 16 foot an alley. Once again, and it does face DeLeon. Moving to the vicinity map. This is the outline of the local historic district in red. The blue is the national, the red is the local. It was part of the expansion. It does face DeLeon, as I stated. To the north of DeLeon and to the west of Boulevard was the subject parcel that was included in the expansion area to the local district of Hyde Park, which this sits in. Moving to an aerial that was taken last year. The subject site is here. You see it flanked by many trees. The trees have been removed since then, and they are under violation for that. That should not be a basis for the discussion moving forward. We're going to focus just on the contributing structure and if it meets the criteria in the ordinance. Moving forward, this is the primary elevation, which faces DeLeon. This shot was taken so you see the expanse of the parcel to the east. Just moving to the contributing structure, you see that generous porch with some architectural details. If you look at the barge rafter in this and some of the other photos that will be shown, you see that the barge rafters have a detailer notched in. You have the knee brackets, you have the shake shingles on the gable end, and the lower portion of the structure is cantered and it has a mitered corner. Just looking in on the wraparound porch, which is a very character-defining feature in some of the craftsmanship of the structure on the sill. Once again, looking at the front elevation and the west elevation, and the contributing structure that shares a common property line to the west. Moving back to the subject site. It is a long elevation, so I took it in 2 different pictures. This is the front, obviously, which is the porch. And as you go to the rear, you see the double gable. And then continuing on the east elevation where the double gable interjects with that facade, and then the second story. And the contributing structure that shares the common property line to the east. Moving around to the rear elevation, which is here. On the site, there is a non-contributing accessory structure. This will not be part of the review this evening. Series of street shots. This is looking down the street and you see some other historic fabric along De Leon. And the other direction, you see some one-story structures. You see the setbacks from the property line. And just to conclude, directly across the street, we have this contributing structure as well. And that's the secondary elevation that faces De Leon. At this time, we'll have the presenter, the agent for the owner, to come forward and address the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
I do have a PowerPoint. Do you put that on the screen? All right. All right. Members of the commission, my name's Melissa Strassner. My address is 3700 South Tamiami Trail, Sarasota. We also have an office here at 324 South Hyde Park Avenue. I am here today representing Silver Tuna LLC in this request. Also with us are our design team. We have Leo Cannon with Barrel Engineering, who did the structural engineering report. Peter Carlin with Carlin Construction to speak to the construction estimate, as well as Ralph Schuler with JVB Architecture, who provided the letter in support to the demolition of this structure. First off, I just want to say we realize that this is a very sensitive topic, both for this commission and for the neighborhood. We do not take it lightly. And so we have thoroughly requested our consultants to evaluate this property and provide their opinions in making the decision on whether or not to request a demolition in lieu of renovation. Based on those consultations, which I'll go over in this presentation, that is why we made the determination to make this request. I did attempt to reach out to the neighborhood associations to kind of let them know why we're going the demolition route. I spoke to Lee Carden and Patrick Camino. They were very amicable, but obviously we understand the intent for them is to keep historical structures. And so unfortunately we weren't able to meet common ground, but I did attempt to reach out so that they can get additional information as to why we're making this request. So with that said, I'll go ahead and move forward with the presentation. This is the property location. Mr. Vila kind of already covered where this is located, so you have a very good idea. It is located at 1105 West De Leon Street, so I won't belabor the location too much. The zoning for this structure is multifamily, less than 10 units. It consists of 2 residential units, and that is the only contributing structure on the property. As Mr. Vila stated, the back detached garage is non-contributing and not up for discussion here. The property is currently vacant and abandoned. To our knowledge, it was for quite some time before the applicant took possession of the property. During the abandonment of the property, it was neglected and left in unlivable conditions. A little bit of background that is of some importance. The applicant purchased the property on January 4th, 2023. At the time of purchase, the property was not included in the Hyde Park Historic District. The day after the purchase on January 5th, 2023 is when the City Council approved the expansion of the Historic District. The current owner was not aware of this. It would not have come up in any title work because there was no recorded ordinance that would show up to let him know that this was going to be expanded into the Hyde Park Historic District. That only shows up on title work once the ordinance is recorded. Upon realizing that the property was included in the district, Mr. Sardisco, who is the representative here for Silver Tuna LLC, immediately went and got consultants who have provided the reports that are before you in the application package that I submitted. Briefly going over the criteria, it's noted in section 27-116F1. We are to show that alternatives to demolition or relocation, such as planned development districts, are not possible. Whether the landmark or building or structure can be retained on the site, whether relocation of the landmark or building is appropriate and feasible, whether the applicant has the ability to build the proposed new construction within a reasonable period of time, and whether demolition is justified by an economic hardship. Obviously, Section E is the big one here, and we will go over each of the criteria showing that this is an economic hardship for the applicant and it does justify the demolition. Staff did request additional information by way of disclosure forms, verification letters, inspection reports. This property was purchased as is, so those are not available. The coming slides, I will delve deeper into why demolition measures are being taken or requested and why relocation is not feasible. I'm just going to touch down, just for the purposes of the record, regarding the rebuild soon after the application is approved. The applicant already has some plans that he's ready to submit and believes he can get permitting done within 60 days. So why alternatives to demolition are not feasible? The structural report prepared by Beryl, which we included in the application materials, does show that this property meets the definition of unsafe and dangerous per local and state authorities. And Leo with Beryl Engineering can speak more to that if you have any questions on it, but I will go over additional slides to kind of show why this is an unsafe and dangerous structure. The cost estimate for renovation in lieu of demolition will show that the measures create an economic hardship. Additionally, the structural engineering report is supported by JVB Architectural Firm. In regards to rezoning this to PD, that's not going to solve the issue here because it will not take it out of the historical district and make demolition possible. Really, all it will do is add on to the timeline of requesting the PD. And even if we do request the PD, and I can have Ralph with JVB Architecture speak to this more if you have questions on it, but it's our consultant's belief that, or determination, that if we request a PD, it would still require variances because you're not going to be able to fit the 3 structures on that property with the way that the lot is designed right now. In regards to relocation not being feasible, I went ahead and did a Google search on PropertyShark.com, which can show available properties within certain geographical areas. I just ran this search on Friday of last week, and the only lot that came up within the Hyde Park Historic District is a lot located at 1207 Bayshore Boulevard. The current listing price is $2,999,000, so basically $3 million for that lot. It's not going to be feasible to purchase a lot at $3 million to move this structure to that lot, nor would the structure really fit in with the surrounding area on Bayshore Drive. We see the Mammoth homes and the multifamily structures that are going up on that street. So just to kind of get an idea of what's the closest area outside of Hyde Park and the nearest vicinity to move the structure to, 2 came up at 408 Columbia Drive and 604 Channel Drive, both going, well, one going at 1.3 million, the other at 1.4 million. These are roughly 2 miles away. Based on our conversations with consultants that actually do this, that actually do structural moves, 2 miles is a pretty far way to move a structure. It can be very costly, and so that I'm going to kind of touch on that as well. What we have on West De Leon and really within the Hyde Park Historic District are narrow tree-lined streets. It makes moving a structure very difficult. We would probably have to get with Parks and Recs, see about getting trees trimmed. There are overhead utility lines. Those have to be taken down and put back up. Police escort coordination, as well as coordination with the Florida Department of Transportation if that's required, depending on the road. All of this, generally speaking, would cost about $250,000. And that's not including the permitting that would be required and the cost of the vacant lot that would need to be purchased. We did not include these costs in the economic hardship, but this would further add to why this would be an economic hardship for the applicant. In addition, the average time to relocate is about 6 months, so the property will lie dormant during that entire time with the inability to produce any income. The economic hardship criteria is within section 27-116F3. I'm going to go over them quickly for you. In regards to an estimate of the cost of the proposed demolition for relocation, we provided that to you. Peter Carlin with Carlin Construction, who knows this area very well. He has actually sat on Architectural Review Commission himself, conducted the cost estimate, which he states would be $882,897 to fully rehabilitate this structure and make it into a livable, rentable, or sellable structure. The purchase price that the applicant paid for the property was $730,000. That's going to give us a total cost of $1.6 million, or a little over $1.6 million, to get this property in a reasonable, usable form. The average cost of a home or that's been sold in Hyde Park, based on Realtor.com, is $557,000. Just that in itself lets you know that it's that's what Realtor.com said. So just that in itself lets you know that we're looking at a structure that's going to be 3 times or double times the cost of what an average home is sold for in Hyde Park. We provided the engineering report from Beryl Engineering. Estimated market value, we did have an appraisal done on July 25th, 2023 to determine the value of the property as is and the value of the property after demolition. There is a slight typo here. I have $685,000 for the as-is value with the structure in place, and the actual value after it's demolished goes up to $725,000. The reason for that, per the appraiser, is because you're adding the cost for the demolition of the structure or rehabilitation of the structure. I think he was probably a little bit more lenient with averaging the demolition to be $40,000, but that is what he proposed based on speaking with 3 consultants that he knows. The estimate from an architect or developer as to the economic feasibility of rehabilitation or reuse of the existing structure. Again, we've provided that by way of the construction renovation budget, the architect opinion letter, and the structural engineering report from Beryl Engineering. The amount paid for the property was $730,000. It was an arm's length transaction with the Lois M. Ingram Revocable Trust. The property is income producing, annual gross sales for the previous 2 years. As far as we know, the property was not inhabited in the previous 2 years. Since the applicant has had it, he has not been able to have anybody live in there in its current condition, so that information is not available. It would be 0. The remaining balance on the mortgage is $580,000. All appraisals obtained within the previous 2 years, we have provided that. The one that was obtained at closing on October 4th, 2022, and then the most recent one dated July 25th, 2023. Any listing of the property for sale or rent, you can see them within the table there. Property was originally listed on August 19th, 2023 at a price of $875,000. That price was then dropped to $750,000, likely from, just taking information from the buyer segment that was viewing the property. And then we see the pending sale and then the final sale to the applicant for $730,000. The assessed value of the property, according to the last 2 most recent assessments, the most recent assessment in 2022 assessed the property at $543,000, and then in 2021 it was $264,000 and change. So the assessed value is going up. The value after demolition would be $725,000. Real estate taxes, in 2021 they were $4,366, and in 2022 $10,455. The form of ownership, it is an LLC, Silver Tuna LLC. The only other information that we would provide is the fact that we've done our calculation with just hard costs, but the applicant is incurring soft costs every day by way of legal fees, consultant fees, further application fees to go through this process. So I just want to kind of line out for you the market value versus renovation costs and why this is an economic hardship for the applicant, just in hard numbers. The median listing price for a home in historic Hyde Park Historic District, like I said before, is $897,500. The median sales price is $557,500. So we're seeing a disparity between a listing price and what the properties are actually sold for. Nonetheless, we took the conservative approach and took the listing price to show what the price per square foot would be, and that would be $615 is your average price per square foot. In our case, you can see the numbers there, and looking at the total projected with the cost of renovation and the purchase price of $1.6 million, we're looking at a cost per square foot for this applicant of $1,103. That in itself shows economic hardship for the applicant if they were to renovate and do what the staff is recommending versus a demolition and rebuild. Furthermore, you have a different tax base that is going to come and purchase. These townhomes are going to go for roughly $2.5 to $3 million. You're going to get a much different client base, or I should say demographic base, of buyers for that type of product than what you will get in trying to slap together and renovate what's there. I did do a search on the code violations on this property, and I know from 2018, I think might have been the last time somebody lived there, and there was homeless vagrancy going on this property. There were abandoned vehicles on this property, overgrown shrubbery on this property. The applicant is looking to come in and rejuvenate this property. That's all they're looking to do. I know that we've gotten some letters in opposition, and there's talk about greed. There's talk about, doing an exception for this person. That's just unkind, and it's not true. This applicant, yes, they're in the business of making money, but that's only going to help the Hyde Park Historic District to have a better demographic and a better product there. I do want to go over the engineering reports from Beryl Engineering on some of the deplorable condition of the property. The brick supports and the crawl spaces are deteriorated, they're damaged, they're leaning. The wooden support beams under the subfloor are noted to have excessive moisture damage. There's evidence of termite damage. There's previous exposure to fire damage. The floors are unlevel. There's also vertical and diagonal cracking on the damage on the plaster walls, kind of showing that there's settling going on with this structure. There's noticeable movement of the home when you actually walk through it. The second floor has not been able to be accessed by any of the consultants, including the city's consultant, because it's unsafe and dangerous to try to go up the stairs and get to the second floor. You just can't even go up there right now. So the conclusion from that report is that this is an unsafe and dangerous structure. And just to kind of show some of these photos, these are photos that are in the Beryl report that are in the application package, showing the rear of the house, the stairs that are not usable, the pillars underneath, the fire damage. These are the walls and the water damage inside the home, termite damage, additional moisture damage. So with that, I'm going to let Leo from Beryl come up and just kind of talk a little bit more as to how he made his decision that this was an unsafe and dangerous structure. And then I'll come back up for the summary.
Good evening. Leo with Beryl Engineering and Inspection. So basically, when we came out to this property, we inspected the main building, and we did a thorough inspection. We went into the crawl space, we went into the first floor. We weren't able to get into the second floor. As she stated, no one's been able to get into the second floor. Under the crawl space area, a lot of the bricks, the piers, they're leaning, they're deteriorating, they're on the verge of collapse. That became very evident when we went into the first floor. We saw the stress cracks above any of the load-bearing walls, above the doors and the windows, things of that nature. This house had shown evidence of being abandoned for several years, neglect, and it really was just in a really bad state. I would have liked to have gotten into the second floor. I would have liked to know exactly what's there, to see how much worse it was in that addition piece in the back, but just we weren't able to access it because of the stairs. This home, I realize it is historic, and I live in a historic home, of a 100-year-old home. And there are several in the area around where I live, and there are some that we say that should be rebuilt, and there are some, unfortunately, that need to be demolished. This one just, it's in such bad shape due to the neglect, the rear second floor piece that we can't even get to, and just what we saw from the previous fires, the cracking, the termite damage, everything that, if this home had been lived in for the past 15, 20 years and had been maintained, we wouldn't be at this point. But it was abandoned, and that's what brought it to this point, because these homes really can't sit abandoned for a prolonged period of time, because then the elements reclaim the house.
So in summary, the structure has been deemed unsafe and dangerous by professionals in the field of structural engineering. There's no reasonable alternative to demolition without creating an economic hardship. The property will not yield a reasonable investment-backed expectation if the application to demolish is denied. Relocation is not reasonable or feasible. The applicant can rebuild a new structure, meeting all zoning and historical design requirements within a reasonable time after demolition. And the cost of renovation will result in a price per square foot that is double the median listing price in the Hyde Park Historic District, creating the economic hardship. So with that, we do respectfully request this commission approve the request for demolition, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Move on to the staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Dennis Fernandez, Architecture Review and Historic Preservation Manager. Just prior to moving on to the staff report, I did want to reiterate for the information that Ms. Strassner was presenting was provided to you by the applicant in this bound form. You have a copy of that. That is available digitally on the Excel system as well for the public. As I mentioned before, we do have a more extensive staff report based on the nature of the request. So staff is requesting 30 minutes of time for the staff report and evidence by its consultant.
We have a motion, please, to extend the time for staff report from 10 minutes to 30 minutes.
I move to extend the staff report presentation for ARC 237, or 23-367 at 1105 West De Leon Street from 10 minutes to 30 minutes.
A second.
Second.
All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And Ms. Bonds will be presenting the staff report and the administrator's recommendation.
Okay.
Good evening, Commission and public. Thank you for having me tonight. My name is, again, for the record, my name is Heather Bonds. I'm the Historic Preservation Specialist. I'll be presenting case ARC 23-367. This is a consideration for demolition of contributing structure at 1105 De Leon Street. This is the location map that you've seen to show that the property is within both the local and National Register district for Hyde Park. Just to start with a brief historical context, this is the Florida Master Site File that was completed during the time of districting of the National Register district. At that time, it was noted in good condition. from the National Register nomination. The dates of significance then are 1886 to 1933, which this site fits into. And the De Leon Street for this address is included in those street addresses. At the time the site was evaluated, it was considered altered but contributing. And that definition is that it retains most of its original visual character and which can be returned with reasonable effort and cost to its historic form. Things of that nature would be enclosing porches, removal of decorative architecture features, replacement of windows, and construction of non-conforming additions, which you'll see at this site. This is our earliest Sanborn of record showing the house here in 1915. You'll note that there's a one-story accessory structure in the rear. Moving on to 1922, you can see the accessory structure has been rebuilt at that time with a two-story structure. And by 1931, the accessory structure in the rear is again changed. It also is addressed on its own as 1105 and a half. And you'll also note that the second story addition was put onto the primary structure by 1931. Jumping to 1976, the rear apartment footprint again changed and the extra garage space was removed from the site. Per the property appraiser footprint here in 2023, you can see it has the same historical form as 1915. Therefore, per the National Register District guidelines, it does still retain its form or could be returned back to its historical form. Some additional historic research to show the established date built. Using city directories, we can see that it was listed in 1910 and 1909, however, not in 1908. So we can assert that it was likely constructed in 1908 to be included in the 1909 city directory. And just for historical note that the first resident was a Walter F. Davis who owned a plumbing company. So based on our historical findings, we can say the structure does contribute to both the Hyde Park Local Historic District and the Hyde Park National Register District. The primary structure is at least 115 years old, built in 1908, and the accessory structure and the second floor rear addition are non-contributing to the site. Now to review today's case request. Staff evaluated the case based on code requirements. The burden of proof is on the applicant to prove that there are no alternatives, it cannot be preserved, and there is an economic hardship of preservation. This is that code that outlines the definition of the burden of proof, and I'm going to touch on each of these 5 points. First, are there alternatives to demolition? Staff finds that there are viable opportunities. It can be returned to its original single-family form, as the National Register suggests, and used as a single-family home. They can remove all non-contributing structures, and they can just construct a detached accessory structure with units. It can also be used as a multifamily use to restore the historic building, remove the non-contributing structures, and construct new attached multifamily additions. This is that first potential opportunity. Using the zoning codes, they can restore the single-family residence and have an attached accessory structure. I would note, being in an historic district, they can have up to 22.5 feet in height, where in normal zoning, accessory structures would only allow them 15 feet. So this could be a 2-story accessory structure in the rear for them. To note, the neighbor in 2018 converted their garage into a guest quarters with a parking pad. And this is just a photo of what the neighbor did. And you can see the subject property there behind it. This is the second potential option that they can have. This is the multifamily option. They can restore the structure in the front, and that could be 1 unit with a second-story unit in the back, connect it with the garage, and wrapping around to the front. This would allow them to almost triple the existing square footage while staying compliant to the allowable building envelope. This is that example, Ghosted Inn. This shows that the large side yard can be utilized, and keeping with the integrity of the site and the block, they can keep the scale, massing, character, and form of the historic neighborhood. Our second consideration is if the structure can be retained on site. Both the applicant and the city had engineer companies inspected the site. Both reported areas of damage due to deferred maintenance from previous owners. They found different remedial approaches though. Beryl has recommended a demolition solution. MCE presented a feasible restoration path and provided the following improvements as a practical means to retain the contributing structure on site, and they'll go more in depth in that for you all. But basically expose the exterior walls to replace or supplement wall framing as necessary, and remove and replace board sheathing that is damaged from insects or water, point the brick foundation piers, plumb sloping piers, supplement wood framing in the crawl space, and remove hung ceilings, expose the plaster ceilings, and repair as necessary. The third consideration is relocation. The applicant had not provided specific information in their application to us that we had reviewed. According to MCE, the building could be moved to another site. It would be necessary to affect the structure, building repairs prior to moving the building, and foundation repairs could be accomplished after the move. There have been recent relocations in the district of similar age structures and conditions. This is 1226 South Howard Avenue, which was successfully moved to 2114 West Jeton in 2019. It was built during the time of significance in the Hyde Park Historic District, and in its new location, it maintains its historic relationship to the site and setting. This was fully restored in 2021. Second example, also built during the time of significance, was 1815 South Rome, which was successfully moved to 1910 South Fremont Avenue in 2021. It also, in the new location, maintains its historic relationship to its site and setting, and it was fully restored of 2023 this year. You'll also note that the accessory structure was enlarged for the new site that they can use for additional units. Here is to show how it moved. Where the red square was its original site, to the green, which is where it is now, 815 South Rome Avenue. There it is in its original location, and here it is on the bottom, showing how it was moved, or where it was moved to. The fourth consideration is whether the applicant has the ability to build the proposed new construction within a reasonable period of time. The applicant has provided their intent to immediately move forward if granted this demolition. And finally, 5, whether the demolition is justified as an economic hardship. Staff contends that the site can generate revenue and is not an economic hardship for multiple reasons. The property has been used with multi-units since the 1920s, and this can likely continue with zoning approvals. The owner has the opportunity to remove those non-contributing accessory structures and second-story unit to construct newer units. And a phase 1, if they break it up into phases, a phase 1 rehabilitation and use of the 115-year-old contributing structure can fund a phase 2 new construction of the additional units, offsetting the economic hardship. Here is the definition of economic hardship from our code. It means the inability of the property to be put to reasonable beneficial use, and in the case of an income-producing property, the inability of the owner to obtain a reasonable investment-backed expectation. These are the 3 points of economic hardship which I'll evaluate now. The inability of the property to be put to reasonable beneficial use, the inability of the property to obtain reasonable investment-backed expectation, and staff may also consider whether or not this hardship is self-imposed. So the first, can the property be put to beneficial use? Staff contends that the property can continue as the historic and existing use as a multifamily income-producing site. These are the zoning entitlements. Again, they'll need to run any zoning approvals through zoning, but according to the property appraiser, the lot is 70 by 120, which is 8,400 square feet. It is zoned RM16, which requires a minimum of 5,000 square feet. RM16 allows 1 unit per 2,723 square feet of land, thus that will allow up to 3 units. RM16 allows several different uses from single family, and then for multifamily, they would require a special use from zoning. Here's the vicinity zoning map. You see to the west and north in the orange, that is single family use. The brown notates the multifamily use to the east and south of the property. Just a quick look at the property itself. It is a bit larger than the average of the surrounding block square footages. The average of those in this block is 7,163 square feet. So staff surmises that there is a clear and expectant opportunity for beneficial use for the above average lot size. The next consideration is the inability of the owner to obtain a reasonable investment-backed expectation. Reasonable is not defined as highest and best. Staff contends that the site can produce a positive net for the owner. If completed in 2 phases, the second phase of constructing 1 unit can be offset by the income of a phase 1 restoration and potential rental. This was provided by the applicant that shows the proposed cost of rehabilitation. We do note that some of these costs overlap for complete new construction. They do provide over $41,000 for the non-contributing demolitions, and it does call for all new material, including windows, doors, crown molding, floor, and hardware. Again, these are the numbers provided by the applicant that was purchased for $730,000, a claim of $882,000 of renovation cost, and which would be a total of $1.6 million investment per them, or an 834 square foot based on the square footage provided by the property appraiser. Note, this does not include any sort of additional units or compared to other multifamily properties. According to Realtor.com, in July 2023, the median listing home price in Tampa was $480,000, and the median listing home per square foot was $299. Looking here at Hyde Park, you see that the median listing home price in Hyde Park Historic District is $1.6 million, and the median listing home price per square foot was $641. I do want to offer that the applicant had different numbers than staff, though we used the same source. That is because if you look in their report, they used North Hyde Park numbers. That is a different neighborhood than the historic district Hyde Park. And I do have a map to show that that is a separate neighborhood. This neighborhood was also named one of the best places in America to live by Nietzsche. So staff would say that they do have an opportunity to receive their investment back. The final consideration is if staff is it self-imposed? Staff contends that the claim of hardship is self-imposed. Staff confirms that all parameters of 27.256 were met and public noticing was perfected in accordance to section 27.149 of public noticing for the adoption of the expansion of the Hyde Park Local Historic District. Any dispute about inadequate disclosure is a civil matter between the current owner and the property seller. I'd like to quickly review the timeline of that Hyde Park expansion. I've highlighted here all the times that it was publicly noticed and that there was a public meeting on record. First noting that on May 4th, 2021 is when the application was submitted to expand the district. And there was a year between that, or about 10 months of research and public outreach. Further, I want to highlight the applicant's, or the listing for this house. It was originally listing on August 19th. Submitted by the applicant was an appraisal that was done on October 4th of 2022. And there's about 3 months between that date and the actual sell date of engagement of the applicant with that property. And during that time, you see notices were sent out again, and there were 2 public meetings during that time. Here's the location of the public signs that were posted in March 2022, July 2022, and November 2022. Those signs likely would have been up in November 2022 until the city council met in December. And a close-up to show that there were at least 4 public notice signs along De Leon Street. Here's the online listings. We just want to point out that it was promoted as a historic home. The description talked about removing drop ceilings and basically restoring the structure. You'll also notice under lot features, it stated that it was in a historic district. And under disclosure, they said that there was a a seller property disclosure available. This is online listing from Estately, which shows some interior photos. Again, the lot feature is listed within a historic district. TampaHomesold.com showed that it was in a historic district. Redfin showed that it was in a historic district. Compass showed that it was in a historic district. So in summary, we would like to say that the owner purchased a protected structure. The property is over 50 years old and was a contributing site in a National Register district at the time of listing, during their due diligence period, and their final sales. All properties over 50 years old within the city require a demolition review by historic preservation. National Register districts do have review requirements. The Hyde Park National Register District was established in 1985. The owner had opportunities to contact HP staff for potential review processes. Zoning also provides zoning verification letters and advisory opinion letters, which would have provided potential zoning changes and are frequently requested during due diligence periods. Going back to the original considerations, staff feels that the burden of proof was not met. There are alternatives to demolition. The property can be rehabilitated, and the economic hardship has not been proved. The administrator's recommendation is that staff recommends denial of the request to demolish the contributing structure based on the applicant's ability to obtain a reasonable return from the existing building, and that the property can be put to a reasonable beneficial use without approval of the demolition application.
Thank you, Heather. Next, I'd like to invite up James Meltreader with Master Consulting Engineers to summarize his findings with his inspection at 1105 De Leon.
Thank you. My name is Jim Meltreader. I'm a registered structural engineer in the state of Florida. I've been practicing for 50 years, and I've spent many an hour underneath old buildings, this one included. I visited the site in August of this year. I inspected the building both underneath and on the ground floor. I could not get into the second floor because of the danger of the stair construction and its dilapidation. We noted that the piers need repointing in the crawl space. There's termite damage both in the floor joist and in the beams that support the joist. The stair in the front of the building has settled, creating a tripping hazard apparently the soil was never compacted when the stair was constructed. The ceilings are plaster over wood lath, and due to the damage that they have sustained, the former owners put a drop ceiling in place, which should be removed and so that you can repair the ceiling. We believe that there is no danger of collapse at the moment, and we can supplement the wood framing in the walls and in the crawl space and bring the building structure to code. There's an estimate in our report of between $80,000 and $130,000. This is for structural repairs. Thank you.
And that concludes the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now open it up to public comments. If you're here to speak either for or against the project, you may do so at this time. Remember, when coming up to the podium, please do state your name and your address, and give us a spelling of your name for the record, please.
As we begin the public participation portion, if you would please note that the staff has submitted 20 letters into your packets, which were provided to the staff for this particular hearing. Those will be entered into the record as well.
Received. Oh, yes, if you do have the form filled out, please make sure that is given to the staff, if you're giving up your time, or receiving time.
Is everybody ready? Okay, my name is Patrick Chimino. I'm the president of the Historic Hyde Park Neighborhood Association. I live at 604 South Oregon Avenue, and this structure is in our neighborhood. Basically, this request for financial hardship flies in the face of historic preservation for those of us who have renovated. I myself have renovated 3 structures over 32 years. And this structure, according to the ARC staff, is preservable. We see this as a case of caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. If we went through a great deal of effort to expand the local historic district precisely to protect a structure like this. And many of us have done that before. And many properties in similar shape have had a great deal of investment put in. The structural engineer identifies, yeah, we know, we've done this. We've gone into houses with no floors and a toilet in the living room. To some people in the neighborhood, the use of financial hardship seems ludicrous, and I think the numbers corroborate that what the ARC presented. And really and truly, this is a case the buyer failed to do their due diligence prior to purchasing. Hundreds of owners in Hyde Park, I've been in many of the houses over the years I've lived there, have done a great deal of work protecting contributing structures and made viable investments, because keep in mind, we have apartments, we have condos, we have commercial, we have single-family homes. So we have all that in Hyde Park, and they've been heavily invested. There's an office building on Magnolia near Bayshore that has had over $1,000 a square foot invested in it between purchase and renovation. There's an apartment building on Dakota near Bayshore which has just been totally renovated, both contributing structures. We all know there's not one option for renovating. We all understand budgeting, but there is an option for this. It's not prescribed, but retaining the contributing structure and adding something. That's what a lot of people do in our neighborhood anyway. And the ARC elegantly made those proposals. So granting a demo request, we would look at as a serious affront to historic preservation and a very poor precedent to set. So this is an easy motion. Deny it. Deny the demolition. Protect a contributing structure. We supported the HPC. We did an extra notice during the period because of an issue that came up voluntarily. So this was fully noticed, more than fully noticed. So all three neighborhood associations are very much opposed to this, and others, they're going to speak about it. We've invested a great deal of time and money into expand the district, and anything less than a unanimous denial flies in the face of what we've done to protect our historic district. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Leah Carden, Leahcarden, 311 South Delaware Avenue. I stand before you today as the president of Hyde Park Spanish Town Creek Civic Association to voice our strong opposition to the proposed demolition. This property is not just any ordinary house, as you've heard. It is a contributing structure in our historic area, and it represents an essential part of our community's heritage. Recently, our local historic area underwent a significant expansion, a development designed to protect precisely the type of structure that 1105 West De Leon represents. The decision to expand the historic district was not taken lightly. It was the result of careful consideration, community input, and a shared commitment to preserving the rich history of this neighborhood. While we understand that the property owner may not have been aware of the expansion when they acquired 1105 West De Leon, we must emphasize the numerous community meetings and mailings that were conducted to keep residents informed about these changes. It is the responsibility of all property owners within the historic district to stay informed about zoning regulations and changes that may affect their properties. Preservation of our historic structure is not merely a matter of nostalgia. It's an investment in our community's future. These historic buildings tell the story of our neighborhood. They add character, charm, and a unique identity to our community, drawing visitors and residents alike. In addition to the cultural and aesthetic value, historic structures also contribute significantly to property values, as we've shown. As the Hyde Park Spanish Town Creek Civic Association, we are committed to preserving the unique character of our community and safeguarding its historic treasures. In conclusion, we urge you to consider the long-term consequences of demolishing 1105 West De Leon. We ask for your support in opposing this demolition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mary Lou Bailey, Maryloubeley. I live at 912 South Oregon Avenue. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Board of Hyde Park Preservation, Inc. I'm the immediate past president, still on the board, still very active. The last motion we took at my last meeting in August before I passed the baton to the new president was to unanimously vote that ask you to deny this demolition. We feel very strongly about this. Preservation is at the core of our organization. That's why our neighborhood association adopted the name Hyde Park Preservation, Inc. I'm sorry these people are unhappy with it, but the rights of the collective community in the historic district outweigh the economic opportunity of one particular owner who seeks to optimize it. The economic hardship argument for me did not hold water. We want you to uphold the guidelines. It's simple in my mind. It's simple in my board's mind. We all work together to protect the historic district, to save contributing structures. At our first test, don't waver. Enforce the guidelines, please. I've been in the district 30 years. I'm very passionate about Hyde Park. I've lived 13 places around the world before I moved to Hyde Park. I am not leaving. I love it there, and I ask for your help in protecting this special place. One last thing I wanted to say, particularly on 9/11. The Medal of Honor Commission, there's a convention every year for Medal of Honor winners, our greatest heroes. A few years ago, right before the pandemic, that convention was hosted here in Tampa. And I was contacted by the organizers to put on a private home tour in historic Hyde Park for those Medal of Honor winners and their families. That's how special this place is. I'm getting a little choked up because it is 9/11 and everything. But this is really special, not just to those of us who live there, are raising our families there, have invested over and over in the preservation of our homes and our neighborhood. This is special to our country. Please protect it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Linda Aiken, Linda Aiken. I live at 1211 South Gunby Avenue in Hyde Park. I'm a board member on the Historic Hyde Park Neighborhood Association and a real estate agent. I've got just a couple of factual matters regarding the listing of 1105 West De Leon. And if you look on here, you can see that the property went under contract on 10/31/22 and it closed on 1/4/2023. So in over 60 days, the buyers had an opportunity to do the due diligence, to contact whatever authorities, to do whatever engineering, inspections, whatever kind of inspections and due diligence they were interested in doing. And if you look also on the Realtor remarks, it's not worded quite correctly, but the listing agent said it's the buyer's and buyer's agent's responsibility to contact any and all historic society. So there was a reference made earlier to the seller's property disclosure, which, because the house was not occupied by the seller at the time, they did what's called a non-occupancy disclosure. But nevertheless, it says, sellers are making no claims or warranties of such property. It is the sole responsibility of the buyers to inspect named property to determine such condition. Additionally, on either one of the two contracts commonly used, the contract forms commonly used for a residential sale, which this would have been, and I submitted it as evidence, there are instructions and regarding inspections and doing your due diligence and professional advice. And in bold, it says, buyer agrees to rely solely on seller, professional inspectors, and governmental agencies for verification of property condition, square footage, and facts that materially affect property value and not representations or otherwise. Additionally, there are notations, buyer exercises the right to terminate, accepts the physical condition of the property and any violation to governmental, building, environmental, and safety codes, restrictions, or requirements, but not subject to sellers continuing as-is maintenance. So regardless of how, doesn't really matter. Regardless of how you look at it, the buyer had sufficient opportunity to do their due diligence in over 60 days that they were under contract, to have the inspections done, to inspect the historic records or governmental requirements. So I encourage you, please, to leave it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bill Kestelik. I'm a resident at 912 South Fremont Avenue. It's Kestelik. I'm resident of Hyde Park as well as a registered architect. Neighborhood is everything. Context is everything. This is part of a larger community. This house needs to remain to create the value of this community. The buyer bought this house because of the value of this community. By destroying it, he's destroying a part of our community, the value that comes to the community. So I'm not going to argue his points. I'm going to argue our points that it would detract from us, the homeowners who currently live in Hyde Park. It will devalue us. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Stylen, and I live 2 streets from this lovely historic Hyde Park home. Several weeks ago, as I was walking my dog, I noticed the request for demolition sign. I thought surely this was an error. I am certainly surprised that I am here right now voicing my opposition, because I was under the impression that our neighborhood historic homes were already protected and only allowed to be restored. Please enforce the laws, rules, and guidelines that we already have for historic preservation. As I understand it, the owners cannot afford the restoration. I have a few recommendations for them because I went through the same situation 30 years ago. DIY, do it yourself. Consider it a labor of love. Spend only what you can afford at the time. Restoration may take years. If you don't love the property as it is, consider selling it to someone who will, rather than demolishing it and building a cookie-cut white elephant. Maybe you need to go to New Tampa. They are more likely to have what you are looking for in the first place. So just a note, I found on Zillow, 1 block away approximately from this particular home on 610 Newport. There's a restored home, single family, built in 1903, selling for $2.5 million. And then on my street, 501 South Orleans Avenue, single family home, 3 blocks from this home, was sold on March 10th, 2003 for 1.6. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Pam Canella. I live at 604 South Orleans. 1105 West de Leon is located in our historic district. I know you've heard all this before, and our staff was excellent, but I wanted to say something too. This property is designated a contributing structure. In 1985, most of this area was designated historic, national, and local. In more recent years, the residents have expanded the historic district to save homes such as this one from being demolished. Developers from other areas do not respect the historic value of our neighborhoods. For them is an opportunity to maximize their profits. They allow their properties to deteriorate so that they can claim enormous cost of repair, claiming economic hardship. This is one of the biggest problems happening in historic neighborhoods today: demolition by neglect. Owners have a duty to maintain their property and should be held responsible as per Tampa Code, Chapter 19 and Chapter 27. As you can see in this picture, I'm sure it hasn't been mowed since they purchased the property. Lack of maintenance of this property falls on the responsibility of the owner and does not fall under the criteria of economic hardship as per Florida statute, which states that a hardship cannot be self-created. Claiming economic disadvantage due to the owner's preference as to what he would like to do with his property is not sufficient to constitute a hardship entitling the owner. This neighborhood is designated a historic district with laws, rules, and guidelines that are unique not only to this applicant and his property, but to everyone who lives or buys in the neighborhood. Therefore, does not fit the criteria for hardship. Historic districts have been proven to have a positive and stabilizing effect on property value. It is this collection of unique and historical homes in our neighborhood that attracts people to our historic neighborhood. Preserving these homes for future generations preserves the past and secures the future of our economy and city's growth. Please vote no to demolish this home. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to come forward to speak for or against the project at this time? Seeing none, we will move forward with the commissioners asking questions. I'll start on my left tonight.
Who am I asking questions of? Who's?
I'm sorry, we do need an agent representative.
I apologize, yes?
So this is the portion where the commissioners ask questions of the applicant, and so someone always needs to be at the dais, and then if you need to bring anybody up, you may do so.
Yes, ma'am.
I had a question. How many other consultants besides the two listed, the JVB Architects and Barrel Engineering, did you consult with? Did you consult with any other architects or contractors or structural engineers who actually have historic preservation experience?
So I did not personally call these people. Jeff Sardisco, the applicant, is the one that called his consultants. It's my understanding that Peter Carlin and Ralph with JVB both have extensive experience in rehabilitation of historic structures, as well as Barrel Engineering's
Can we,
representative that's here today.
can we have them testify as to what their historic preservation experience is?
Absolutely.
Good evening, Ralph Schuler, JV Architect, 2401 North Howard Avenue. I live in the Tampa Heights Historic District. I've lived in Tampa for 25 years, done historic preservation work for 22 to 23 of those years. Been employed at JV Architect for 17 years, of which I've been doing historic district work in Hyde Park, Tampa Heights, River Seminole Heights, and Tampa Heights, I'm sorry, and Ybor City. Specific to this particular property, we did evaluate the property. We did submit a report. We stand by the report. But that wasn't really your question. Your question was what my experience was.
Yeah, okay. I mean, now that you're here, have you restored, in your professional experience, in this extensive professional experience, have you restored homes that are in this condition?
Have I personally? I don't.
Have you worked on historic preservation of properties that were in the condition that this house is in?
Have I worked on projects where this house of this condition has been restored? The answer is yes, I have.
I can't hear you.
The answer is yes. I have worked on projects with a project of extensive damage or neglect or whatever the word you want to use that has been restored. Yes.
Have you worked on projects and restored projects that had even worse damage than this house has?
Well, sir, I didn't personally go through every single foot of the building, but this project and this building has extensive issues. There's no doubt about that. I think both engineers expressed that. My opinion was that there's been significant additions and/or renovations that compromised its historic nature. I understand it's been deemed a contributing structure, and I don't really dispute that. I would just
right.
Our report.
Okay. Yeah. You questioned whether the skirt was appropriate, whether the wraparound porch was appropriate, but we've seen from the Sanborn maps that was how the house was built. Okay.
Understood.
And those were your main objections to it being saved? That certain aspects of the property's design did not have historic significance?
So our evaluation primarily focused on the addition on the second floor, which I felt and the principal of the firm felt that really undermined not only the structure, but the quality of the overall expression.
But you weren't allowed to get in it, and you did get in it, so you don't know that.
Well, I mean, we visually inspected the exterior. I don't mean by the structure. Again, I was in investigating its character more than its structure. The engineers both evaluated the structure more and fully.
Okay, and during our presentation earlier, that we learned that second floor addition was put on.
I understand.
Very early.
I saw that it was put on many years ago.
Yeah.
I don't dispute that. No.
Okay. All right. I guess that's all the questions I have for you as JVB. Thank you. Go back to the owner's representative, please.
Did you want to hear from each of the consultants and get their backgrounds? We do have the construction consultant.
I think that would
as
be
well
very
as the
good for the
structural engineer.
record.
Yes.
Just to enter that into the record, please. Yes, Mr. Carlin, you may come up.
Peter Carlin, 4230 South McDill Avenue, the president of Carlin Construction. I've been working in the Hyde Park with historic renovations for 15 to 20 years. I've worked in Hyde Park, Seminole Heights, Tampa Heights. I've done extensive renovations and additions to similar structures. So
Okay.
I do have the experience. So if you have any questions, I mean, I was asked to provide a estimate of what it would cost to bring this home up to a sellable standard, and that was what I did. So I really.
Okay, I understand that. Have you worked on and reconstructed and rebuilt houses in worse condition than this house?
Each house is different. I mean, we inspected this home. I mean, I can't attest to whether it's worse than others that I've worked on. I mean, they're all require an extensive amount of work, hence the cost that was in that budget. I couldn't attest whether this one's worse than the one I worked on that I'm finishing up this year or the one that I finished up 2 years ago. So,
Okay.
I mean.
All right, but your cost estimate was not to preserve the house. The cost estimate was to basically rebuild the house, replace everything in the house, windows, doors, floor framing, floor finishes, siding, roofing, everything, replace it all, basically.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That's all.
Okay, thank you.
We also have the engineer come forward as well and answer the same question, please, as to your historic preservation experience.
Leo Cannon with Barrel Engineering and Inspection. In addition to living in the Ybor City Historic District, Ron and I worked on several projects together over the past decade. I was a former member of the YCDC, which is the Ybor City Development Corporation, which is part of the CRA of Ybor City. Additionally, our firm has done several inspections and/or construction plans for houses in Seminole Heights, Tampa Heights, and Ybor City over the past decade.
The particular engineer, while you're standing, the particular engineer that wrote this report, is he here?
He's not.
Is there a reason he's not here?
He's no longer employed with Barrel. He and his fiancée decided to rent an RV and tour the nation for 6 months.
Okay. How long had he been employed by your firm?
How long has he been employed by the firm?
Had he been employed by your firm when he did this report?
About a year.
How long had he had his professional license by the time he wrote this report?
About a year.
Okay.
I just want to follow up that line of questioning. Did you oversee the work that he did?
I reviewed the report and reviewed the inspection. I review most of the reports that our firm produces, especially ones that of this nature would end up before a board.
And did you personally visit the site and the structure?
I did not personally visit the site, but I did review the extensive amount of photographs that we had taken of the site.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, while you're still here, can I ask you, how many piers were damaged of the house, of all the piers that were there? We saw photographs from the other structural engineer that didn't show, the photographs showed perfectly plumb piers. How many piers are damaged?
I know in the MCE report, the one photo that was provided in the report was more of an overview. We had photos of individual piers. I would have to pull up that, a report to show the sum of the piers. The majority of the piers had some issues, especially on the interior. Anything near a former plumbing penetration, such as the kitchens, the bathrooms had issues.
How difficult is it to rebuild a foundational pier? I don't need to review the photographs. I'm just asking, how difficult is it to restore a brick pier?
Restoring a big brick pier, normally if it's on the interior, you'd be looking at replacing the brick pier with a supplemental concrete block pier with foundational pad. It's all going to depend if you're going from the top down by removing the flooring, or if you're going to do tunneling or going into the foundation itself. So its difficulty would be part of what is the entire renovation, because there are two different means and methods that you can use to restore those. On the perimeter, you would have to do the pointing, as Jim has stated before.
Okay. In the burn marks on the structural framing that is indicated in your structural report, how deep is the char of those timbers?
Traditionally, we will rank timber, especially wood elements, on a loss of section scale, which is commonly used by the insurance companies. We'll rate them between 0 and 15%, as not structurally compromised, between 15 and 35%, Generally, you would then either sister or scab additional lumber on both sides of it, and then anything over 35% is considered structurally compromised. In this instance, majority of what we found was probably in the 0 to 15 mark. There was some 15 to 35, which would need some additional sistering and or scabbing.
I think that's all the questions I have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prokop. Commissioner Taylor?
So my first line of questioning is going to be for the owner or applicant. It was testified to us by public comment that this particular now owner had roughly a 60-day diligence period. Was that true and correct information?
Yes, if you're asking me, yes.
No. Correct.
Okay, and during that time, did the owner reach out to the City of Tampa Building Department, Planning Department, the necessary departments to find out, would there potentially be some issues with their, growth plan moving forward?
It's my understanding that the applicant worked with their architectural consultant, and they confirmed the zoning at that time, because the zoning was what it was. It was not part of the historic Hyde Park or Hyde Park Historical District. During the due diligence period, as I stated, nothing would have showed up in the record that this was on the historical Hyde Park Historic District until after the sale went through. The property had been dormant for a long time. I don't know if any of the notices reached the sellers for them to then give that information to the owner, but he did not have that information. The architectural consultant did not have that information. It was not known until after the purchase went through.
And who
And
was?
as I stated, title work would not show that until the ordinance is recorded and in the public record, which
So-
would not have happened during that 60-day due diligence period.
Could you tell us who that architectural consultant was?
JVB Architecture.
So the same one that's here tonight?
During
Okay.
the 60-day due diligence period.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, so then my next, let's see. So again, back to the owner. We see the bid that you had come in, or the estimate, I should call it, for the renovation cost. Was this the only set of numbers that you had put together for this project, or did you have multiple general contractors take a look at this that had historical preservation experience?
So it's my understanding that Peter Carlin did have the most experience, and the applicant felt comfortable moving forward with him for the cost estimate.
Okay, did he in fact ask Carlin to rebuild completely every single aspect of the home, or was he looking for a preservation price?
No, this is a preservation price. This is the cost for rehabilitation. I would have to let Mr. Carlin come up and speak to how he got those numbers, but this is what it would be to get that home up to code and in livable condition.
Okay.
It's his opinion that you basically would have to rebuild the majority of the home.
All right, and then the last question I have for you right now is, you mentioned in your presentation that part of the problem and why we're here now is, in the past, all the code violations that had contributed to this structure fallen into its dilapidated state. Are you aware that there's current code violations on the property?
Those current code violations are overgrown shrubbery, and it's my understanding that the applicant has every intent to correct those code violations.
Okay. All right, so I'll ask, my next line of questioning is for the engineer, Beryl. Most of the questions I had got previously asked, but I would, as I visited this particular property and took a look, from a distance, from the front and the rear, as well as the side elevations, one thing that jumped out at me was, after reading the reports and seeing the engineering report basically say this home cannot be lived in. It's uninhabitable. I noticed that the ridge beams seem to be level. All the window sills seem to be level. All the sill beams seem to be level. The siding seems to run level. Would these aspects of the home typically be out of level if we had a foundation problem to the extent that it's uninhabitable?
Well, I mean, we do have the foundation problem that this home is uninhabitable, so I guess I'm not following the question. We do have the foundational issues you're talking about. Have they manifested towards the exterior? No, but we do see the interior stress cracking, and above doors and windows, we have the interior stress crackings happening in the structural nature by which we would see. Once you start taking that siding off, I'm sure that will become even more self-evident.
So do you not see these same sorts of stress fractures in homes that are, say, 15 to 20 years old?
No, we do not to this extent. I mean, these are, I guess the equivalent of a 15, 20-year-old having these types of stress cracks would be more like full subsistence or sinkhole type. I mean, you'd be comparing a 15, 20-year-old typically block CMU home to what this was is a 100-year-old pier and beam wood foundation.
So if we compare apples and apples here, a 15 to 20-year-old home on pier construction with crawl space, frame construction, and you're testifying that we would not normally see these types of stress fractures in a home.
Well, even if you take a look at now, 15 to 20 years, I mean, across the street from where I live, there are two brand-new, old-looking structures. And when we go into the foundational crawl space of those, I mean, there's more concrete. It's less about the wood and more about the concrete. You typically don't have these brick piers that you would have from back then. So, I mean, it's still, even today's standards are still different than what was back then.
Okay. So I'll just close with I guess the question of, you're telling us that, and unfortunately none of us could get into the home to see the home. You're telling us that the interior is worse than what we see on the exterior. And
Well, I
so my
mean-
question would be, would we not see that in some form or fashion somewhere in the roof system at least?
Trying to see if we have pictures of the roof system in this report. So, I mean, part of the roof system we couldn't even get to because.
I'm not asking about the, when we look at it from the outside, because unfortunately as a board, if we go into the neighborhood and look at a property, we're not allowed into the property. So the testimony that I'm hearing is hey, the inside's a lot worse than the outside. So what I'm trying to get here is, we're not seeing it from the outside that there's interior damage. And even the pictures we have don't really show me sloping floors, if you will. Yes, I see some wood deterioration. Yes, I see some termite damage, but nothing structural because it's all covered up. So I'm just trying to get an idea of, because when I read your report, it sounds like the foundation is completely gone. But my guess would be that it's only a small percentage of the piers that are actually dilapidated to the point that they need to be completely replaced. And so that's what I'm asking is how, just like my fellow commissioner asked, how many of those piers need to be replaced? How many could be repaired? And there's many different ways to do that. And would they be causing structural issues that we should be able to see up through this? Again, the foundation is just that, it's holding everything. So if it's settling, wouldn't it make sense that we would see some of that from the exterior?
Yeah, as I stated before, most of the damages were manifesting in the interior, and I don't have a pier count for the number of piers. We just have some of them photographed within the report.
The only other question I have for you is, there was a mention of the floors bouncing. You were not the one that did the assessment, so unfortunately you may not be able to speak to this as far as how much bounce is there. Let's say it's really bad. You testified that you have extensive historic preservation experience. Would you agree that most historic homes and the type of construction that was used do have some sort of bounce in the floor system?
Since I didn't walk this property, I can just talk about other houses that I've been in. They will have some level of bounce, some more areas than others, spaces between piers. Usually when you get to that middle point between piers, that's where you'll start to have a extra level of bounce per se. So it would vary from structure to structure. And even inside of a structure would vary on locations, your distance to piers.
So have you ever had a project where the customer asked you to eliminate that?
Traditionally, what happens is we're going to take an example of we'll just take one of the 1,000-foot Sears Roebuck's 1926 bungalows that you can find in Seminole Heights. Traditionally, when you're rebuilding those foundations, you'll have that center line beam, and then you'll have the two on the end. And then when you're rebuilding the floor system, you end up putting two supplemental beams in it. It's actually adding two beams, so then you split that foundation into 5 support beams.
So what I call a sleeper beam, if you install that in between, just as you said, that would eliminate this bounce?
Potentially.
Okay. The general contractor. You mentioned that you've renovated quite a few properties in this area recently.
Yes.
Could you tell us what the average square foot, knowing that all properties are different, but the average square foot of a typical historic renovation would be?
It varies per job. I mean, this one, obviously when we did the cost estimate for this particular project, we didn't have plans, we didn't have engineering, so I had to base it off of 2 very recent projects that we've done in the district. And I kind of use that to extrapolate my numbers based on what I think would need to be done. So can I tell you what the exact square foot number is? I can't. You can probably take that number and divide it by the square footage at the top of my estimate, and that'll give you somewhat of an accurate ballpark of what it would cost. Because I mean, the scope of work from the projects that I've worked on recently and this one is pretty much the same.
So what you're testifying tonight is, because I can tell you that number's around $600 a foot.
Okay.
That, without getting into details of pricing models and financials, you're testifying that that would be the going rate for a renovation in Hyde Park.
That's what I came up with for this particular project, without plans, without engineering, based off of the experience that I've had with the other similar homes in the Hyde Park district.
Okay.
So what if that, once you had an engineering set of drawings and architectural plans, would that number be exactly the same now? I mean, it would have to be looked at with all the different quantitative information, but I was working off of, historic data at this point and a site observation.
So have you been through this home? Have you been under it, over it?
Uh-huh.
How many piers would you estimate need to be repaired and or replaced?
Well, based on my experience with the other projects, with an extensive renovation like this, all of the piers would need to be replaced.
Do you know how many that is?
None of them are, I don't know how many piers are underneath the house. I don't have a count, but none of them are built to code. So there's no footings, there's no vertical steel, there's no concrete block, there's no tie downs for the foundation. So in order to bring this house up to code, you would have to replace all the piers.
Well, there's none of that in any historic project.
Have you historically had to bring every historic home you've renovated to current
Not everyone,
code?
but the most recent 2 that I've done, they were extensive, and yes, they both required all of the foundation to be replaced.
So what you're telling us tonight is that our local building department is making us take out existing piers and put back up to code piers with
Well,
rebar.
I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you what I've had to do on the other two projects based on the level of renovations that we had to go through.
Right, so I'm trying to get
So
a,
assuming this is similar level of renovation, which, you know, both engineers have testified that the exterior walls would need to be brought up to code, and there's probably some beam issues. Yeah, I mean, it may require all of the piers to be replaced, but again, without an engineered set of drawings, I'm speculating, but I'm making it clear that that's how I came up with my numbers. So if we find out that maybe somebody along the way put in a bunch of good piers underneath the house and we don't have to replace those, then they don't have to get replaced, but I don't know that.
I'm not currently questioning your numbers. What I'm trying to question is to what extent you're telling us that you're gonna have to rebuild these piers, because there's multiple ways to repair piers, as you know, I'm sure.
Of course, yeah.
And it doesn't always mean a complete new footer with new block and new rebar and block fill. There are other ways to do that. So what you just told me, though, was the two previous projects that you're referring to, of course, I don't know where they are, don't know the extent of the renovation, but that you were required to completely rebuild them. And so what I was asking was that a requirement that the building department required, or was that a requirement that you?
That was not necessarily a building requirement. That was something that was determined when we had a foundation company do a survey underneath the house, and then they worked with the architect or engineer to come up with a plan for the renovation. So it wasn't necessarily the building department saying you have to replace this foundation. It was based off of the report from the foundation repair company and then the architect and the engineer. And that was that. So I got a set of plans with a new foundation drawn, and that's what I did.
So ultimately, on those particular projects, what we could say is the owner, after getting extensive consultation, decided to move forward with that plan.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. I noticed when I went through your proposal here, basically it's a complete rebuild. I mean, down to taking the siding off, resheeting, subfloors, roof deck. So I guess my first question would be, what was your why in determining that all of those materials needed to be completely replaced?
Well, this goes back to and I use these two projects because they're the most recent ones. We've done many more, but you know, we had extensive structural issues with these two other projects, and I use these two as a basis for what I speculate will happen on this one. You know, the floor system had to be, we didn't remove all the floor beams, but we had to put in new ones, sister up others. We had foundation repairs, which led into, you know, the exterior walls, which, you know, on a couple of those, maybe we were saving 20% of the studs. The other 80% were damaged, or they weren't working with, the plans called for all new windows on the house. So in order to put a hurricane impact rated window in the exterior wall, we have to frame the opening. So it's a hurricane impact rated opening, not just the window. So we have to put straps, the correct number of jacks, headers. You probably know this, being a contractor. So in order to do all that, at the end of the day, most of the siding had to get removed. So, and then the same thing, we had the same situations with the roof. And this house, you know, when I was in the house and I was looking up underneath the second story addition, I could clearly see that there's been a lot of modifications to that roof structure and floor structure with pressure treated wood and, you know, some unconventional ways of framing. So, you know, the assumption here was that we would have to do extensive structural repairs to bring the home back up to its code proper look. And, you know, so then that, you know, that's why I figured new siding, new windows, all of that stuff.
Can I just interject real quick? Basically, you're telling us that the estimate you provided is based upon assumption. It's
It
based
is,
upon
of course.
projected assumption. It's not based upon reality of this house.
Well, I looked at it. I mean, I'm
You're-
speculating, but no, it's not based on engineering. I mean, of course, the engineers testified that a lot of the piers and are problematic. There's issues with the wall framing, there's issue with the floors, there's issue with the roof, but has anybody uncovered the house, taken the siding off or demolished the interior and taken off all the old plaster to study what we actually need to do? No, that hasn't been done because, you know,
So
so
it could-
yes, we're speculating.
It could
at this
cost
point.
considerably less.
It could, and it could be
Because-
more. I
Well,
don't know.
what
So-
your estimate is to basically replace everything, so it couldn't really cost that much more.
No, but that's
It could only
similar to
cost
what-
less.
Correct, it could be less, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, as I went through the numbers, a lot of these numbers are items that, when I look at it as a contractor who has extensive experience myself in renovating historic properties, I have to ask these questions because I don't necessarily know why a lot of these materials are being replaced, especially on the structural side. So, for example, if you're already going to demolish the interior, so you're going to remove all the plaster off the interior walls, would that not expose the studs from the inside?
It will expose, and that's when we're able to see how much needs to get
So
replaced.
can you not replace those studs from the inside?
I can't frame a new window opening to code and still keep the studs on the inside, because, I mean, the new.
Why would you need to frame a new window to code if the windows are already there?
Yeah, but I'm assuming the homeowner wants to replace the windows so they don't have old windows. That's a pretty typical thing in Hyde Park, to replace a lot of the windows, these wood impact rated windows. So if the windows are not getting replaced, then there would not be a need for rebuilding that window opening and adding the hurricane hardware. So I just don't know what condition the house is in. So I'm giving you a worst case scenario in that situation. So you're gonna
Right,
pick
but
at it.
unfortunately, your client is using that worst-case scenario to try to show a hardship.
I understand.
So we have to ask these questions.
understand,
Because
yeah.
we have to understand where the numbers are coming from. So you're telling us that you cannot open a window opening from the inside, reframe it from the inside, and get the metal strapping in place that would be installed from the inside, whether you were building new, old, or indifferent, without removing the exterior siding and sheeting, if it's even there?
Well, typically when we put new windows in, if we're gonna redo all of the windows, we're gonna wanna add plywood sheathing to the home. Because that's the best way to put a new window in and get correct waterproofing. And that adds a whole nother level of structural stability to the home. So in order to do that, yes, the siding would need to get replaced. If you didn't wanna put plywood sheathing on there and take your chances of trying to waterproof the window in an old wall with old studs, we could do it from the inside. But for me personally, when I do these projects, I want to give the homeowner something that they don't have to call me back on in 6 months because their window's leaking. And if I can put plywood on the outside of the home and rebuild that opening plumb and square and put in a new window, that I can guarantee that. But can it be done the other way? Of course. I'm not gonna say you can't do it.
So I'm glad you brought up Plum and Square. When you visited this home and did you take a look as far as were the walls currently plumb? I mean, we know they're not square, but were they at least somewhat plumb?
Well, it's difficult to see a lot in the building just because there was a drop acoustic ceiling in there. So where the walls, plumb and square, I didn't have my level. But I mean, I did observe the cracks that the engineer has testified to. So that usually means there is some differential settlement going on. How out of plumb, I don't know. I do know that siding can absorb some deflection without getting too crazy, but I couldn't tell you how plumb or how many walls, because a lot of the walls were covered up with paneling and quite a few different materials, so.
So if we just speak of the exterior walls, which is the main structural portion of the home, to the eye, do they look structurally plumb?
I couldn't tell you. I mean, I can't tell you for sure about that. I mean.
Can you pull up a picture of the front elevation,
the eye can
please?
get deceived easily. Pull up a picture. I don't know what
I'm
picture.
asking staff, actually, if they can pull up if we have a picture that we can show that front elevation.
And when you pull it up, please state what date that picture was taken, please.
I think he's looking for the exterior walls.
Okay, so my first question there, because it's right there and kind of just boom, it's right, in our face. That beam holding up that front porch, does it look to have any deflection in it?
I mean, not from a photograph.
What date was this photograph, please? Do we know?
It's within 2 months.
I'm sorry?
It's within
Within
2
the
months.
last 2 months, thank you.
Those rafter tails that are exposed going down that right side, with the shy, or actually there's the left side. Again, you mentioned that you've been to the property, you've been through the property pretty extensively. Did you notice while you were there any, deflection, bowing, deterioration for that matter, on the rafter tails that have been exposed for 110
There's always
plus
rafter
years?
tail deflection, how bad it was difficult. I mean, what I do remember, I'm testifying, I do remember the floor being wavy, okay? I mean, pretty wavy, but that's pretty common in every project we've ever worked on. They're always wavy. The walls are always out of plumb. I mean, that's something we work with and we fix it. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's perfect and I'm not saying it's, the worst, but I'm giving you guys a worst case situation. And those are the two things that I've encountered on my last two projects. So I don't know where this one's going, but you can take multiple different routes to renovating an old home like this. You can go all out, or you can do partial. I just don't have anybody telling me what I would be doing, so I'm giving you my version of what I think would happen. That's all.
What I'm trying to, I guess, wrap my head around is the cost in front of us. So, because again, one of the main reasons that we're even here tonight is of a claim of economic hardship. And so it either is or it isn't. And a lot of that comes from your report because you're the one that put a number on it. And so when I look at the foundation repair, you've got a number of $45,000. $45,000 for a home that is under roof 1,800 square feet. Is that something you would self-perform, or is that something you would subcontract out?
That's something I would subcontract out to a company like LRE or Baystar Builders. I mean, but that include footings, that would include piers, that would include replacing a significant amount of the main beams if those are damaged. So yeah, I mean, that number is realistic. It could be more. I mean, we don't know the exact condition, but You
But
got
couldn't
guys,
you-
you got guys that have to crawl underneath the house and shore the whole thing up, dig a footing, dig 20 footings, 30 footings, crawl under there with a hose, pump the concrete in there, so everything's done in a crawl space where you're working with a space like that. So, I mean, you're gonna pay a significant more amount of money for a footing underneath the house than you would if you didn't have the house there and you were just starting. from
But you
scratch.
also priced removing the subfloor. So if you're gonna remove the
I'm
subfloor, you
assuming
don't have
that
to do that
some of the,
anymore.
some of the subfloor would probably need to get replaced, yes.
But also, there's no proof that there's anything wrong with the footings.
I'm
There's-
not saying that I have proof, I'm telling you, I'm just giving you kind of a scenario that I think it could be.
But
And
this
I
owner is
might
declaring.
not be right, but I mean,
This owner is declaring financial hardship based upon your numbers, and you're not sure that your numbers are even valid, is what you're telling us. It's a possible worst-case scenario, but we don't know those
but
numbers
if
are
I had
even.
come in with a light number, like if I had come in assuming that we could
This isn't a
keep all of
bid.
this stuff, so.
This isn't a bid.
I
so-
understand that, but.
But this is this is a financial transaction that this owner is declaring financial hardship based upon what you're telling us is a guess.
Well, if you read the engineer's report, then that is telling me that there's some issues with the home. I
Some
mean,
issues,
they're-
right.
They're the ones that crawl underneath the house, and they're the ones that looked, so I was making some assumptions based on the engineer's report.
So did you actually crawl under the home at all?
Did I know? I looked under there, but I did not crawl underneath the home.
Did you look at the sill beams being there right there at the edge?
You mean the rim beams?
Or round beams, either or?
Yeah, I couldn't see them there underneath the siding, so.
You couldn't look underneath and look straight up?
I didn't look at them, no.
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, again, you're saying that the foundation pricing could be more. Could you not also argue that that foundation pricing could be much, much less? Being we're assuming?
Look, yeah, you could say that. I need a set of plans, engineered plans. I could give somebody a hard number at that point.
So
I didn't have that.
The other number that jumped out at me very quickly was to reframe and repair the exterior walls.
Correct.
You've got a labor number here of almost $21,000.
Yes.
Again, on a 1,800 square foot under roof home.
Stud by stud.
At $75 a man hour, that's still 278 hours. Does that seem realistic to you?
It does. I mean, I've done 2 projects where we spent more hours than that on, so it's all handwork.
Same square footage of home?
Close, not the same.
Okay. And then your lumber price of $30 a foot just for materials.
My lumber price.
You've got lumber and hardware materials, $55,000.
Yeah, that's a package, lumber package, so what's your question
That's
about
more than
that?
I'm used to seeing for a complete new home. So,
Some of these projects that we've used use more lumber than a new home used. I mean, I ended up having to replace all the studs, a lot of floor joists, ceiling joists, so that was the assumption that I was gonna have to replace quite a bit of wood.
so that would include you're gonna replace all of
I mean, because I mean, I'm including plywood for the exterior walls, new subfloor,
roof system.
a lot of new lumber in the roof, correct. It's like framing a new home.
Did you look at that roof system by chance?
I
From the
couldn't-
outside even? Just-
The only part I testified earlier to is when I looked up underneath the second floor addition. That was the only spot that was accessible.
And unfortunately, I've got to ask questions, I can't really testify, but when you looked at that roof system, did you see any deflection that concerns you as a contractor to make you believe that you've got to replace a roof system
Well,
in a complete manner?
I don't think I'm completely replacing the roof, but we're gonna have to do some repairs, so.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because, again, I asked about a value, and you said, well, I'm going to have to rebuild everything. So it either is or it isn't.
I'm gonna go back to how I came up with this number, because we could nitpick the roof, we could nitpick the baseboard. I'm basing it off of 2 projects that I've finished in the past 3 years. They were old homes in historic Hyde Park. Not the same square footage, plus or minus 400-500 square feet. Both of these projects required extensive repairs. So I took those numbers, since I didn't have plans and engineering drawings, and I extrapolated this number from those 2 projects. So
Okay, so I will ask this question, getting away from the actual preservation / renovation side of this, because the other thing that jumped out at me was there's a lot of items in this pricing that it looks to me, and I'm asking if you would agree, that they would have to do whether they built new or they renovated, such as landscaping, painting, cabinetry. Would those numbers not be for either or? That's not an extra expense, is what I'm asking.
well, I mean, this is an estimate that I would give to a homeowner if they came to me and wanted to renovate their property. How you want to put the numbers over here, I don't know. I mean, this is what I would give them.
So if we're
it would
looking, I
include
guess what I'm trying to
landscaping.
ask is if we're looking at the actual economic financial hardship, I think, would you not agree that that would be the structural portion of this project?
I would agree that it would be the structural part plus whatever it impacted, yeah. So, I mean, if you were building a new house there or a new townhome, you would have landscaping, so.
And that number would be significantly less if it was just the structure than the 800 and something thousand that we see on this price.
As far as the landscaping,
If we only use the structural portion. Even the demo, I mean, you've got 40,000 plus of demo, which again is based on assumption of we're gonna remove siding, we're gonna remove sheeting, we're gonna even remove roof sheathing, subflooring. Basically, we're gonna
rebuild the house.
rebuild from the inside out and or outside in. But what I'm trying to get you to answer is a lot of these items are cosmetic. Flooring, cabinetry, countertops, plumbing. You've even got replacing the electrical. My assumption would be, and I hate to, I'm not gonna assume, I'm gonna ask, was there an inspection done on the electrical to see is the electrical current or is it knob and tube wiring?
there's no inspection done. I mean,
Because
what's
you've
that?
assumed that it's got to be completely rewired based on your pricing.
Can the
And
owner
that-
agent come up and answer that question, actually? Has there been any other inspection of the property other than the structural engineer's report? Looking at the building systems, that would be the electrical service mainly.
No, currently we're using the structural engineering report.
Okay.
Okay. And I think that closed out my line of questioning for now.
You have no other questions? Okay. Commissioner Myers?
No further questions.
So for the owner agent, has there been any estimated construction budget for new construction? It is our understanding, and it's been testimony here tonight, that there is plans for proposed new construction on the property, and that you're ready to go with an architect team. If those plans are available, has a construction budget been?
Yeah.
There is a new construction budget, which we would bring forth when we come forward with the new construction application.
Okay. So, in your slide presentation, there was a slide which had all the numbers. It talked about, the median sold, median listing prices, and then it talked about the appraisal when it was first bought, and then the appraisal, and then there was another slide which talked about before demo and after demo assessments. In that particular number, it was 543,000 plus or minus assessment by the city in 2022, I believe, and that there was a number given after demo of 725,000. Who gave that number, the 725? Where did that number come from?
That was from the appraisal report that was prepared by Bay to Bay Appraisals on July 25th, 2023. It's the very last tab in the materials, application materials that we provided. And it's on page 5 of that report.
Was the appraiser that actually came out into the field someone who was familiar with I noticed that the appraiser in that report is based out of Michigan.
No, he lives here in Tampa.
The appraiser that actually filled out the report.
Correct.
The appraisal, okay.
Correct.
Page 5.
And unfortunately, they're not numbered. You'll just have to count them.
Oh, okay. That's what I'm looking for.
Oh, I'm sorry, page 6, miscounted.
So what I find fascinating about those numbers is that it's in higher value than without the, so there's a lot of value in the land. So when we're talking about hardship, financial hardship, and we look at the numbers spent, 730,000 to purchase, another 800 or so, if those worst case scenario numbers are where you end up, and ending up with that $1.6 million spend, but you actually have a $725K value in the land, in the property. Really, what is that loss? Because you're actually seeing that even through this preliminary appraisal of what it would be valued after demolition, should that be granted, is greater than what the property is currently being appraised at.
So I did spend some time researching what is a reasonable investment-backed expectation. And the definition, there isn't a hard or fast definition. It is a fact-specific evaluation. It's usually looked at in a case of takings or inverse condemnation claims. And it's also noted for an in-dom condemnation claim, also known as a Burt-Harris action. It's noted in Florida Statute 70.001. Subsection B2, 3B2. And it could be an activity or such reasonable, foreseeable, non-speculative land uses for that property. When the applicant purchased the property, it was zoned multifamily. It was not in historic Hyde Park District. And so looking at his reasonably investment-backed expectation, it was to be able to increase the value of that property for just that property and the surrounding area by putting in the new construction there. So that is what we're looking at. We're looking at what he could reasonably foreseeably do with that property at the date of purchase would be to tear down that structure and build the 3 townhomes. He cannot do that right now. So telling him he can go ahead and just, when he paid $730,000 for the property and accept $725 at what it's valued at now, he's not getting his reasonable investment back expectation.
Absolutely.
Something came up, so I want to ask staff a question regarding what you just said.
Okay.
This home is more than 50 years old, and there was reference made to a city ordinance that if the home is more than 50 years old, it still has to go through a demolition process to be approved. Is that not correct?
I'm going to grab my code real quick.
I just want to make sure I understand that correctly.
So under 27260, which is kind of aligned with the Historic Preservation Commission Code, there is a process for review of structures that are 50 years or older, and that the administrator should have 28 days to apply certain criteria from the receipt of a demolition permit, which we have not received until this application was submitted. And there are certain criteria that are considered. So under 27260B1, if the building, site, structure, or object has historical, architectural, or archaeological significance because, one, it's listed on the National Register of Historic Places individually, not as a contributing structure. If it meets the criteria for individual listing on the National Register of Historic Places but has not been designated, or that is identified as a contributing structure to a historic district that is either pending for listing, which this was, or is listed on the National Register of Historic Places but which has not yet been designated under the provision of this chapter. So had I received, as the administrator, had I received a request for demolition of this structure prior to January 5th, 2023, I would have denied that request for demolition, and I would have scheduled it before the Historic Preservation Commission.
So if
And they
we
would
go-
have applied this section of the code.
If we go back to their timeline of when this particular property was contracted, were or was the city already advertising, and there was a form that was shown to us and kind of shown the timeline, but I, again, just want to confirm that when the property went under contract, that this area of Hyde Park was in fact already in process of being discussed for inclusion into the existing local historic district.
Had I received an application for demolition following the submission of the applications by the neighborhood associations to expand the district in May 2021, I would have forwarded those requests to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you.
I think that was it for my questions. You know, there were a couple of times when testimony was given that the interior was so bad that certain things couldn't be perceived or evaluated. Are there any photos, because I can't find any in this booklet, that actually show ceilings falling down so that you can't go through the room, or show truly the deteriorated condition of that second story addition in the back? I looked at the stairs. I looked at every photo I could find of that exterior set of stairs for the second story. Granted, they're wood and they're probably a little sketchy, but they don't look any different than many that I've seen myself on project sites. So I really am struggling to understand if the interior is that significantly deteriorated, where those images are, because I don't see them.
Well, I'm basing this off the fact that both appraisers, the structural engineer, and MEC's engineer, when they went out there, all of them stated they could not go up the stairs because of safety reasons. So I'm basing that comment off of the comments of 4 different consultants.
Do you have additional photographs showing the interior where ceilings have fallen in and you cannot move through the space?
I only have the photographs that have been included in the application package already.
Okay.
In the staircase, just to confirm, the staircase you just referred to, though, is the one going to the second level.
Right.
Not the main entry stair.
It's the exterior stair to the side.
Yes, so it's the stairs going up to the second level, not the stairs
Okay.
coming up onto the front porch.
So being this got brought up, I want to ask Beryl one last question from their report, because item, make sure I say it correctly. Under his reasoning for, or I should say he, but under Beryl's reasoning for deeming this property unsafe, number 1, it says the building or structure has collapsed, has partially collapsed, has moved of its foundation, or lacks the necessary support of the ground. So could they come up here and maybe clarify for us? Because once again, I've not seen a picture yet that shows the home being supported by the ground. Everything seems to still be supported by the foundation that was built for this home in 1908.
Sure, Commissioner. I just want to make sure that I'm looking at what you're referencing. For the Barrel report, are you referencing number 1?
Yeah, so on page, I'm trying to, so I think it's page 2 actually of their report.
Okay.
So note number 10 says, we have found this structure meeting the conditions defined by local and state authorities to be declarable as dangerous and unsafe. See below for what constitutes dangerous and unsafe per Hillsborough County Code of Ordinances. And then underneath that is 2 different items that they reference. And the first one being the building or structure has collapsed, has partially collapsed, has moved of its foundation, or lacks the necessary support of the ground. So I guess my question is a home that's still being supported, even if they're dilapidated, by its own peers that were built when the home was built, is that considered partially collapsed, moved of its foundation, or lacks the necessary support of the ground?
We would say that based on some of the piers that we have photographed later in the report, it's showing that the home has shifted, which later we confirmed by looking at the interior walls where I talked about those stress cracks going into the interior, showing that shift within the structure itself. So that would be considered a partial collapse.
And so, again, number 2 says there exists a significant risk of collapse, attachment, or dislodgement. So, again, just trying to reiterate here and make sure I've got a clear picture, you are stating based on the partial deterioration and or collapse, in quotation marks, of these piers is deeming this home unsafe and uninhabitable.
Yeah, I mean, once you start putting people in this home in its current state, I mean, those additional stresses, that live load traveling throughout the structure would accelerate this form of collapse. So this would be considered uninhabitable and unsafe for any occupants.
And so again, you told us about your extensive background with historic properties. You said you live in one. Not sure if you renovated it or not, but because of that experience, I'm assuming, or I'll ask, have you worked with, are we talking 10 clients on historic properties, or are we talking 100, maybe 1,000? What number would you say you've worked with homes that are much comparable and much like this particular home at this phase of the renovation stage?
We've worked with homes throughout all phases of its renovation, from the initial inspection and or design through the construction, doing some kind of, we even do third-party private provider inspections through the construction phase. So for homes of this age, well, this one's 113 years old, but generally they're around 100. We primarily will do more work in the Ybor City, Tampa Heights, and Seminole Heights, since we were based out of Ybor City for a while.
So is there a portion of those homes that are being lived in while you're doing those reports for those clients?
We inspect homes that are both lived in and vacant. So there's different varyings of homes that we will inspect and different types of inspections we do. Our firm does everything from the My State Florida home wind mitigation inspections. We've done like 11,000 for the state of Florida, and then we've done more specialized inspections, forensics.
But my question is referring to historic properties in Tampa, in one of the 3 districts, mainly Hyde Park. With the reports that you've done, are those homes inhabited while you did those reports for the client, or were they vacant?
Some were vacant and some were inhabited. I mean, yeah, it's just, like I said before, it's varying degrees.
But under the same definition that you used for this one, you would argue that they were living in a home that was unsafe and uninhabitable. Is that?
Yes, I misunderstood your question, Commissioner. We have inspected homes of varying degrees that have been inhabited. We have not inspected a home that had occupants in them that were damaged and declared unsafe or dangerous.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for the for any of the applicant's agents? Excuse me.
Just one clarification. Your client was not aware that the building was on the day before it was declared by the city council, it was in the local historic district. Your client always knew it was in the National Historic District because it's been in the National Historic District for decades.
I don't think he did not
Because
have
that would
knowledge.
be
He's
on a
giving me
title
no.
search.
Again, that's not something, zoning matters when you're looking at closing on a property and getting title work. That's not something that's in the public record.
All of
that
the
would come
listings
up.
listed.
And I understand we have the administrator saying how he would make his administrative determination on whether or not he would have brought the request to demolish the structure before the Architectural Review Commission. But either way, it's not going to change the fact if that regulation is going to cause an economic hardship for a person who can reasonably foreseeably use that property as a multi-unit building and is now being told, no, make it a single building with an accessory structure or slap paint on the structure the way that it is and bring in the clientele or the tenants that you can bring in.
No, but it's always been in a National Historic District.
Yes, the records show that this has
That's
always been in a
that's
National
what my question
Historic
was.
District.
They've always known it was in the National Historic
But they
District.
did not know that, no. I looked at my client, he said he did not know that it was in the National Historic District.
But the property's been in the National Historic District since 1985, was that correct date?
I agree with you, Commissioner, it is
Okay.
listed as a National Historic District.
Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, you do have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to touch base on the mistake of using the Hyde Park North District numbers. I did pull up historic Hyde Park numbers, and I'm gonna have to use my phone, I apologize. It's the best way that I can do it. So yes, I see the numbers that staff brought up with the 1.8, but even so, the median listing price is still $684. I think we quoted $615. That's still substantially less than the over 1,000 or 1,100 per square foot that we get when we look at the cost estimate that was provided to us by our contractor consultant. Our contractor has stated that these are not numbers that he pulled out of thin air. He is looking at 2 comparable projects within the historic Hyde Park District and basing his numbers off of the level of work that was required for those structures. He does admit it could be less, it could be more, but it could be more. The last approved demolition that the ARC approved was in 2020. It was approved after the applicant had to go in and do extensive pulling out of walls, starting the rehabilitation process to understand that, you know what, this does have to be completely torn down. I think asking applicants to go to that extent and spend that money is an economic hardship. It's not reasonable to ask the applicant to do that. All he can do is depend on his consultants, which is structural engineer who looked into that property, provided that report. So our consultant got his estimate both from the structural engineering report and from comparables in the area. I do want to remind the board too, or the commission of the demographic that you're getting. And I would deplore the neighborhood to think about the demographic that you're getting. You've had vagrancy at this site. You've had, if you're just going to ask them to keep a single family home and try to get a renter in there, A, he's not going to get his reasonable investment backed expectation, and B, it's not going to be good for the neighborhood. So I understand that the goal is to preserve historic structures. What I am trying to bring home is the fact that this is one of those cases where this structure is in a bad condition. You have an applicant who is willing to restore this property and redevelop this property to have a better tax base and a better neighborhood for everybody around. So with that, we do request that you, I just want to make sure that any of the consultants have anything they want to rebuttal on. So with that, we do request that this commission approve the demolition request.
Thank you. We will go ahead and close the public portion of the hearing and discuss the case.
I think we've all basically said an awful lot of what we want to discuss in our questions. The closing statement was that the contractor used two comparable projects, but without knowing that they're comparable to this house. He has no idea that those previous two projects are what he's going to see in this house. It's a complete assumption.
Agreed. I think the other point that needs to be made in fairness is he was directed by an owner to price a particular thing.
To price an entire rebuild, basically.
Right.
And also to bring it up to code, which in historic preservation, you know, there's no point in bringing up, I mean, you basically have to take out the entire house to bring a historic house up to current Florida building code. You have to tear it down. And that's not what you do in historic districts, and that's not what you do with preservation. You know, we had this discussion a number of times where if you put in a hurricane window into an existing framed wall, you're not getting hurricane proof. It's almost impossible to make a historic property hurricane proof, because to do so, you'd have to destroy the historic property.
Correct.
To do that.
Yes.
Well, I'm not here to question his pricing model. But as a contractor myself, who has done many projects in historic districts and currently getting ready to do more, these numbers just don't seem to be in line with what I see from our subcontractors. Most of these numbers seem to be quite a bit more than what I normally see. And then on top of that, to get to the additional number, you know, there's a 20% CM fee on top of all of these other numbers. So, you know, every company, whether it's a contractor or an architect, I mean, we all have our pricing models and we have our business models and you know, so who am I to question how he prices projects? But I do believe that he was doing exactly what he was asked to do, what he was directed to do, of please give me a worst case scenario to present. And when I look at the size of this home, and I look at from what I can tell from the outside, from the sidewalk, from the alley, again, I wish I could have gotten inside this home. I wish I could get underneath this home. Because what I see is a crawl space that is actually a little higher, or at least as high as, or I should say more higher than most. There seems to be room up underneath it. It's kind of hard to tell with all the vegetation up around, that's growing around it right now, but the things I was looking for were, you know, did I see siding that was all over the place,
And
deteriorated?
Right.
Did I see
Any
rafter
bowing.
tails that were falling apart?
Yeah.
Did I see windows that were falling out of the hole? There was testimony tonight of vagrancy and people living, you know, I didn't see busted windows
Right.
I just did not see a lot of deterioration that we normally see with a home that has been left empty over a period of time. Now, inside may be.
Much of that has to do with the neighborhood, right? I mean, the surrounding neighborhood is not vagrant filled neighborhood.
Inside may be worse than what we see from the outside. I'm not seeing it in the pictures, but I took the time, as I'm sure as all you did, to go to the neighborhood, go to the property. I walked the neighborhood, and it didn't take long, because it was only about a block away, that there was actually 2 properties currently being renovated that looked to be in worse shape from the outside than
Far
this
worse.
particular property in question.
One of the
I find it hard to believe that the owner did not know that this property fell in a historic district.
I would agree, especially with all the listing information.
Every listing had historic property in it that we saw, that was presented to us tonight.
And to be quite honest, you know, there was a statement about zoning doesn't become a thing until you close and you own the property, but most people, especially developers, they do their due diligence, they do go look at the property appraiser's information that's available, they start to dig in to know what they can do pro forma wise. I can't believe that a developer with experience wouldn't have uncovered that, and it just begs.
It's not a coincidence that there's 3 possible residential units on this, available to be built on this.
Well, the thing is
unit.
there's already 3 rental, I mean, you can't occupy them now.
Right.
But they were occupied up until about 2 years ago, it seems, and 3 units. Nowhere in the testimony given today by staff in their staff report was it stated that they could not develop it fully. In fact, there were options shown, and they weren't all the options that are available. And I think until more due diligence is done on the part of the owner, it's a failure if we were to say, go ahead and demolish. I do not see in the images and from testimony given tonight that there is in fact such great structural failure that it's an imminent collapse. And nowhere in their report do they even go out on a limb and state that. That's Barrel's engineering
Yeah,
report.
one of the amazing, when I went to the building, when I went to the property and I drove by, I'm like, the exterior is pristine. It's almost impeccable. It's almost straighter than many houses that are currently being occupied. It's straighter, plumber. There's less sign of sagging. There's no roof ridge sagging. It's in better shape from the exterior than most houses in the neighborhood.
And I think when you look at the interior photos that are available to us in the agent's booklet, there is no sagging ceilings. Sure, there are some drop ceilings and maybe some stucco that's pulled away, but that's because water's been able to intrude. But they're not failing because the structure's failing, it looks like. That's what the imagery seems to suggest.
I saw one area where I saw some deflection in the roof system.
Was that
And
the
it was-
front, or
it
was that the rear?
It was
second
actually
story?
around the chimney, which is very, very normal.
Right.
If there's a place that's going to settle, it's the chimney because it's the heaviest portion of the home.
And this is where we're free to discuss here. I've restored who knows how many houses as an architect that were half as good condition as this one was.
I've
restored them.
personally restored properties that were way worse than this, but that's not what we're here for.
Right, what the
It's-
testimony shows is, even the contractor stated, yes, you can restore this. It does come with a cost factor, but we all know that going into this. It's whether or not there's enough of a economic hardship in terms of the property values use, reasonable use of the property.
So if we look at what the property is today, and let's say they were to get approval to tear this down and move forward with 3 new units. And those 3 new units were 1,200 square feet for argumentative purposes. At a conservative number, that's $1,150,000 at $300 a foot to build these new units, plus the $730 purchase price, which is going to put them at 1.8, close to 2 by the time they factor in their carrying costs, all their consultants. And so actually, in fact, it looks like they could renovate what they have
It's cheaper to do it.
less expensively, still have 3 units that they can rent out for less money than building new. And that's just 1,200. My guess would be they're probably looking at plans larger. We're not at that
We
point to
can't
see those yet,
speculate.
so we're not gonna
We can't
speculate.
speculate at all, but.
But I feel like a real renovation number on this, instead of this 1,516 number that was brought in here to kind of scare people, that number is probably closer to 1.1 or maybe 1.2.
Well, just
But-
to structurally stabilize it, we have an estimate on the record of between $80,000 and $130,000, I believe, is what the estimate was, just to structurally stable the existing structure.
That was from the city's consultant.
Yes.
MCE.
Yeah.
So even if we use that number and then you throw in all of the finishes that would be needed, yes, you're gonna get on up there, but you're gonna have those finishes whether you renovate or build new. And that was
Right.
kind of where my line of questioning was
And that's the
going.
reasonable, right, and that's the reasonable return expected, not the highest and best return. Because it's in a historic district, it's not, it's not what you could possibly do to the property.
I'd like to speak to that. The question for me is not whether or not they knew that it was in a historic district, but could they have known? Because that seems to me to be more important. And I think it's very true that they could have known. Also, it has been spoken that they have an expectation of a reasonable return. But that expectation of a reasonable return is based on incomplete information because they did not factor in the difficulty in doing, we can really easily assume these townhomes, right, where the return would be considerably higher than if they had than if they do not demolish. Yes. So that's, the rest of it is, that seems to be fundamental to this discussion.
One of the other aspects is the hardship issue. The hardship issue involves an $800 and some thousand number of renovation that is completely unsupported and totally a guess. And based upon other properties, not this property, and not a thorough inspection of this property, not a partial demolition of this property, not, it's based upon a total worst-case scenario guess, but that may not be what it is. When all is said and done, and from exterior appearances, that's not what it would cost to bring this house, back to a place where it will not be, quote-unquote, imminently collapsing.
I agree that we don't know, that's not what it's gonna cost, but we don't know if it's higher or lower. We can't know that. I mean, we aren't.
Well, this is a complete replacement. That cost estimate was a complete replacement to build new, to brand new,
Okay,
a brand new house and a brand new.
Let's clarify that. It's not a replacement. They're not clearing the land, not getting a demo. This is assuming.
Right.
They're not getting the demo.
Oh, no,
It
the
is
demo's
not a
in
one-
there.
Not the entire structure. They're talking about the second floor and so the assumption was that
There's
they were
$60,000
asked,
I think $60,000
the
in
contractor
demolition.
was asked look at this and give us the worst-case scenario numbers for renovating, rehabilitating this structure so that it's livable again. It was not clear out the whole thing and build a brand new. That was the assumption made. That's what the testimony was given to. And so the numbers are not a complete replacement. Yes, we can all agree that most of the material, original material, is going to be demolished and removed.
No, the estimate does identify almost every single thing in the building being replaced.
The testimony
Been
given
in line
tonight,
item.
the testimony given tonight was not that they would be, yes, they would be adding structural beams. Yes, they would be adding joists. Yes, they would be adding stud framing. Yes, they assumed that the owner would want hurricane doors and windows, and so therefore they assumed that they would add in
They'd have to upgrade
framing
all the
of the openings. They never once stated that they would take all the walls down, all of the roof down. Not once was that stated. So it's not a brand new construction, and that's what their whole argument is. If it was a brand new construction based on their argument and their testimony, it would be a different number. And we can't know that. We aren't in the marketplace. We're not the contractors with those subs. There's only one contractor on this commission. We cannot know that.
Well, he did testify, though, that he would be removing, based on the other two projects that are comparable, the siding, so he could resheathe the walls.
Correct?
And he assumed he would be resheathing the roof system as well. And then he has in here as a line item on his pricing model, even reframing like the gable ends. I mean, he's line itemed a lot of
I
aspects
agree,
of
and
this,
he did state that, but nowhere in his testimony and nowhere in any other testimony given regarding this construction estimate was it stated it was assumed the entire structure was demolished.
No.
And that's the statement
this is the
want us to be
number.
careful about.
No, this is the number to meticulously go through it stud by stud.
Understood.
And
Replace
rebuild
it
it.
piece by piece.
Correct.
That's how I interpreted the testimony, is that basically the house would be replaced piece by piece. Every window, frame, floor, subfloor, pier, foundation, slab, window, door, shingle, everything. And we would basically, it would not be an old house anymore.
But for me, whether I agree with the numbers or not doesn't really matter, because our criteria says that the hardship is placed on them by actions other than their own. So this financial hardship, even if these were true numbers, let's assume they are. When this home was contracted, we got testimony from staff that if they'd applied for a demo permit then, they would have still had to gone through a process to get this home demolished because it's more than 50 years old and it fell within.
It was in a pending district.
Correct. So even when this home was contracted, and definitely during the diligence period, there was ample opportunity to ask the right people, ask their consultants to ask the right people, ask the right questions, and to potentially back out of this contract if this particular piece of property did not meet what their investment
What their
construction goals
What
were
their
in
goals
the
were.
end.
What their
Well,
pre-flip goals were.
that part of the argument, in my opinion, doesn't stand, because at no point in the testimony given tonight was it stated that they did not have the opportunity to take what they were allowed to do under the zoning ordinance currently for their zoning and develop it with 3 units. At no time were they told they couldn't do that. Whether or not they can do 3 standalone townhouses remains to be seen. I mean, we haven't seen any documentation stating that they can't do it on their part. So, the burden of proof hasn't proven that they can't use it for the reasonable investment argument. In my opinion.
And I have to agree, what I was saying was, the testimony we got tonight was the reason they want to demolish it is so they can build back new. Because it doesn't seem they've looked at alternative ways to rehabilitate this property. But the hardship was created due to a lack of diligence, is what it looks like to me. Because the property was always in a pending historic district.
Agreed. Any other points to discuss?
I just think it's clear that I think we did get testimony from both the architect and the contractor that they can restore this house, that they have restored houses in similar conditions, and that the property doesn't have to be demolished. It's as simple as that. It's a contributing structure in a historic district. And even some of the architect's arguments that some of the historic aspects of the house weren't or didn't seem to be appropriate or contributing, they're original. The form of the house, the porch of the house, all that. I just don't see any cause for this house to be demolished.
Are we ready for a motion?
If we are ready to entertain a motion, we will entertain a motion. However, legal does seem to want to speak.
I just want to, thank you, I do. I just want to remind you that, that the criteria is stated in the code, 27-116F. And as you articulate your motion, just to be sure to tie back your motion to your specific findings of fact in this situation with regard to your consideration of the evidence, as stated in your staff report as well.
It's page 3.
Right.
But I believe that we can just reference the staff report, is that correct? That in accord with the staff.
So what we'd like you to do is, if you look at the staff report, the action on the application, you hold your public hearing, and then you should make findings based on whether or not the applicant has met their burden of proof. So, I think the chair should mention page 3 of your staff report, the very top portion of burden of proof.
If you need a moment, you can take a moment and reconsider what you're going to state.
How you wish to word your motion, yeah.
see if we can make this one fly. Move to deny a certificate of appropriateness to demolish for ARC 23-367 for the property located at 1105 West DeLeon Street, inasmuch as the agent has not satisfied the requirements of Chapter 27, Section 27-116F of the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances, as the submitted application and accompanying documents and testimony did not demonstrate that the threshold of economic hardship was met. We believe that a reasonable beneficial use can be generated without the approval of the demolition application, and that the site can obtain a reasonable return from the existing building.
I'll second.
All in favor, please state aye. Raise your hand indicating so aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Commissioners, as you motion to accept the exhibits and documents presented, please include the PowerPoints that were presented by both the petitioner and the staff in that motion.
Okay. We have a motion to enter into the record all exhibits presented here tonight.
I move to admit all exhibits presented here tonight, including PowerPoint presentations,
Both by the applicant and staff.
by both the applicant and staff.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries, and we are adjourned. See you all Wednesday.